What's poppin', niggas and niggas and non-niggas and non-niggas? It's your boy Bread Pill Black, and welcome to another episode of PragerUggh. Today's episode is going to be the top 5 issues facing Black America. If I had to take a guess about the top 5 issues facing Black America, I would say poverty, education, inability to accept LGBTQ Black people, violence, and white supremacy. Let's see if we agree on any of these things. Well, considering it's PragerU, probably not.
What are the 5 biggest issues facing blacks in America? Here's my list. Problem number 5, the victim mentality. Nothing holds someone back more than seeing himself as a victim. Why? Because the victim is not responsible for his situation. Everything is someone else's fault. And the victim sees little chance of improving his life. How can he get ahead if someone is holding him back? All this makes the victim unhappy, frustrated, and angry. This is how too many blacks see themselves, as victims.
Bruh, stop calling us blacks. And you're right. Victims aren't responsible for their situation. Is it black people's fault that they're seen as more dangerous than white people? Is it their fault that they've had harder times getting jobs than them? All that stuff isn't the fault of black people. It was done mostly by white people in power and their racist policies and politics, knowing that it would disproportionately hurt them. To quote Lee Atwater,
Yeah, now y'all want to quote me on this. You start out in 1954 by saying nigger, nigger, nigger. By 1968, you can't say nigger. That hurts your backfire. So you say stuff like forced busing, states' rights, and all that stuff. And you're getting so abstract now. You're talking about cutting taxes, and all of these things you're talking about are totally economic things. And the byproduct of them is blacks get hurt worse than white. And subconsciously, maybe that is part of it. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying that if it is getting that abstract and that coded, that we're doing away with the racial problem one way or the other. You follow me? Because obviously sitting around saying we want to cut taxes, we want to cut this, and we want is much more abstract than even the busing thing. And a hell of a lot more abstract than nigger, you know. So any way you look at it, race is coming on the back burner.
so, is that the fault of black people or blacks as they like to put it? Black people are victims in this country, always have been. We still excel though, black excellence and whatnot. We've always been able to, but ignoring the damage that has happened to us and not be victims doesn't help anyone but the perpetrators.
So much so that their victim status becomes their primary identity and their ruling ideology. I call it Victimology. Unfortunately, many black churches preach this victimology. Many black parents pass it on to their children, inner city schools teach it to their students, and the black media reinforce it. Meanwhile, the NAACP and other black grievance groups fundraise on it.
Yo, so I can tell this man was banned from the cookout and he's been salty about it ever since. Victimology. So, in order to first discuss how to fix a problem, right, you have to first address it and talk about how it got to that point. But victimology sounds like something that a gaslighter would say, or someone who does not care about the struggles black people have been through for the last, 400 years. Black churches, black media, and the people don't just say we are victims or whatever this nigga is lying for PragerU about. They just remind us that we've gone through stuff in this country, and we still are, but to never forget who we are despite it. I know the line of thinking this man probably had when he wrote whatever the script is for this video, and it's essentially just saying, hey, white people, because those are the main people watching PragerU. Hey, white people, white conservatives, black people are just victims, and it's their culture that makes them victims. And that's honestly pretty disrespectful.
Problem number 4, lack of diversity.
He's about to go on a tangent about the diversity of thought, ain't he?
Blacks repeatedly demand an honest dialogue or debate about race. But how can there ever be an honest dialogue about race between blacks and whites when there is virtually no honest dialogue between blacks and blacks? It's hypocritical. And if a black doesn't think whites are ultimately responsible for black people's problems, they're labeled a sellout, Uncle Tom, or race traitor. As long as this type of groupthink exists, race reverence of the Al Sharpton, Jesse Jackson type will continue to be celebrated, while independent black thinkers such as Professors Thomas Sowell and Walter Williams will be shunned.
This was dumber than I expected, and that's saying something concerning that is PragerU. Also, he forgot Sambo and Coon. We also call them that. So, many black people will reject the Thomas Sowell and Walter Williams of the world because we don't want to hear white people talk about these type of issues. And they repeat what they say. They repeat what the uninvolved, uncaring, smug white conservatives say. Shoot, they give them the talking points to ignore discussing problems facing the black community. White conservatives see Thomas and Walter Williams as the good blacks. And why the fuck would black people want to listen or get advice from these people when they deny our issues? Walter Williams as the good blacks. And why the fuck would black people want to listen or get advice from these people when they deny our issues? Diversity of thought is essential, but when that thought is just white supremacist light rhetoric being repeated in blackface, they can just shut up. They don't try to build a community. They talk down to us for white people to say, y'all should be more like these ones that don't challenge us and make us feel better.
The honest race dialogue and debate that first has to happen is not between blacks and whites, but between blacks and blacks. We demand diversity from others, but need to practice it ourselves where it really matters, in thought, opinion, and even political affiliation.
None of that shit matters. Black people are not a monolith, and many do need to be more open. But that has to do more with being honest about our blackness and acceptance of non-straight and non-American black folk. So when your thoughts and opinions do not make or better the culture, the people, or our situation, you are essentially a Trojan horse for white supremacist rhetoric, we don't have to listen. You're just going to blame black people for ish they literally had no power in, while giving the people who did the harm a pass.
Problem number 3, urban terrorism. As just about everyone knows, but too few talk about publicly, in majority black cities, violent black-on-black crime is rampant. A Department of Justice study from 1980 through 2008 revealed that blacks accounted for almost half of the nation's homicide victims, 47.4%, and more than half of the offenders, 52.4%, all while being 13% of America's population.
Does he not think black people understand how alarming the crime rate in our community is? Now, I will not say black on black crime because we don't call crimes between white people white on white. And LOL, they said 1352. Poverty is the main factor in crime. Most crime is intraracial, meaning within the same racial group. The origin of this claim is from FBI statistics. Technically, even these statistics show that black people were arrested for 38.7% of homicides. We include thousands of homicides where the perpetrator's race was unknown. The people using the statistic don't really use it correctly, but that's not surprising. A lot of right-wingers don't understand the facts or data they use. Finally, even when you use the 38.7 figure, the FBI statistics are a joke for a variety of reasons. The reason why will be detailed in the comments below because it's a complicated, nuanced issue and just other things I gotta handle right now.
The Tuskegee Institute conducted a study of all known lynchings of blacks that occurred between 1882 through 1968. During this 86-year span, which is essentially the post-Civil War era up to the Civil Rights era, 3,446 blacks were reportedly lynched. Presently, black-on-black murder eclipses the number of blacks lynched over the course of 80 years, roughly every 6 months.
So he's comparing the number of lynchings from this era to now. That seems dishonest, and in my heart, I can hear a dog whistle. Why? Why do you think black people commit so much violent crime? Is it because they are inherently violent, or is the argument the culture?
The culpability for this disproportionate amount of mayhem actually lies with a menacing 2 to 3% minority within the black populace. I call them urban terrorists. And since they're literally spawned from problem number 2, the black community protects them.
He's about to say the culture, ain't he? Also, my bad, he didn't mean 1350, he meant 350.
Problem number 2, proliferation of baby mamas. The disintegration of the nuclear family has led to an astronomical increase of single mother households. According to the Moynihan Report, in 1965, nearly 25% of black children were born to unwed mothers. The report's author, Daniel Patrick Moynihan, said this was a disaster in the making. He was, of course, vilified by so-called black leaders and their progressive allies. But he was right. Today, the out-of-wedlock birth rate is nearly 75% and even higher in some urban areas.
Daniel Patrick Molyneux, or whatever the fuck his name was an advisor to Nixon who was racist and was complicit with his racism. I'm pretty sure that's why so many black people in progressive light do not fuck with him. Remember the Lee Atwater quote? Nixon was racist as fuck too, and his Southern strategy had one of the effects of putting many black fathers and men in jail. Remember the Lee Atwater quote? Nixon was racist as fuck too, and his Southern strategy had one of the effects of putting many black fathers and men in jail. I know some might have the welfare Democrats' bad logic when answering this question. When they do that, they answer in bad faith because they ignore what Nixon and Reagan and Bush did to us. They flooded drugs in their communities, jailed them for having the drugs, took their jobs away, leaving them impoverished. And then you blame the people affected by that for the aftermath? Something don't seem right here.
To be clear, baby daddies share this responsibility with baby mamas. Yet, while baby daddies are blamed and rarely shown compassion, baby mamas are rarely blamed and receive both compassion and support. This lopsided dynamic and the previously listed pathologies stem directly from the number one problem facing the black community.
Does he speak with actual black people? Not the Sambos or PragerU, but everyday black people. As someone born in a place where baby mamas are somewhat common, they only blame the guy when he's a bum and choosing not to take care of the kid. Only show support to the women? They're usually the ones taking care of the bastards, so why not support them? They also get crapped on because they're baby moms, and people look at them as less. If they get any sort of help, they're seen as welfare queens, among other ish. They literally can't win, and saying that they shouldn't have gotten pregnant is a waste of time. And why be misogynist when you can be misogynoir? Like seriously, like they talk about this issue a lot. A lot of conservatives will talk about this issue a lot, but they don't seem to ever think about the why or anything involving critical thinking on the subject at all.
Problem number one, unquestioning allegiance to so-called progressive policies. Unwavering loyalty to progressive liberal policies is the primary reason these dire conditions persist. It both makes them possible and perpetuates them. It's no coincidence that progressivism is the common thread that binds predominantly black cities where single-parent homes, failing schools, rampant poverty, and crime predominate.
Oh my fucking God. It's because of progressive policies that we can vote. That there aren't white-only businesses anymore. That we are technically equal in the eyes of the law. Anyone who complains about progressive policies don't care for equality. Fucking Southern strategy happened. The false war on drugs happened, which disproportionately hurt black people, but they want to blame progressives? That stuff was conservative policy. Many of the issues persist in this country because we have both parties numb to black people's struggles and actively worked to harm them. Democrats are utter shit, and they aren't progressive, but they will acknowledge what happened and try to correct it in a milquetoast way. That's way better than what Republicans do, because Republicans will just want more law and order while cutting off access to help, lowering funding for education, and other things that lower crime and better the communities. But you want to blame progressives? Get the fuck out of here with that bullshit, cuz.
Look at cities like Detroit, Philadelphia, and Baltimore. They've been run by progressive Democrats for decades. If their liberal policies were at all effective, these cities should have become models of economic growth and prosperity. Instead, they're models of dysfunction. By fostering and exploiting the victim mentality, discouraging self-examination, subsidizing baby mamas, and making excuses for black thugs, so-called progressive policies don't alleviate the problems that afflict the black community. They aggravate those problems. You may have noticed that racism did not make the list. Why not? It's simple. There will be no solution to the problems afflicting Black America until more blacks recognize that the issues plaguing our community are ultimately self-inflicted. Does racism exist? Sure, but there are other problems far more serious. And waiting until there are no more races will mean waiting and making excuses forever. I'm Talib Starks for Prager University.
Progressive does not mean liberal, which does not mean Democrat. Also, F the cities. Most black people live in the South, and the South contains the worst states to live in for every possible metric outside of football, and they are mostly red states. Progressive policies would be to legalize marijuana, something many black men go to jail for, and expunging their records for that offense that can better their future. Progressive policies would be expanding education access to poor people, which many black people unfortunately are. Progressive policies would be expanding welfare benefits. Progressive policies would be Medicare for all and universal basic income, which would greatly help the many black people in need of decent healthcare and extra income. Guess the leading group of people against that because they would rather have people suffer and lace up their bootstraps. Republicans and conservatives. In fact, they support shits that hurt them more. They love to bring up the 1994 crime bill, but ignore that many did not think it went hard enough. Many, Republicans anyway. This entire video is him finger pointing and talking down to black people because he knows better for them. He even ignores racism, which heavily affects black people in politics to this day, the same way it has always been. But no, he wants to push personal responsibility. This video essentially victim blames, while ignoring why they are victims in the first place, which is because of racism. Talib Starks can go eat a dick, and this has been Bread Pill Black for PragerUggh. I wish y'all a good one, and y'all probably can hear it in my voice, but this video actually pissed me off more than the Candace Owens one. I just can't stand it I just can't stand cooning.